Hello, everyone, and good evening. Welcome to the next session from the DevOps Community of Practice here in Ottawa. Today, we are going to talk about software supply chain security and SBOM spotlight. So, this is a very interesting topic. We would like to begin this conversation with a few things. If you don't know me, I'm the founder for the DevOps Community of Practice here in Canada. This community has several chapters: Ottawa, Toronto, Edmonton, Montreal, Atlantic provinces. Go check out our events, and if you're interested, join our next event, or also you can be one of the contributors. We have chapter leads for every chapter, so you can also reach out to the chapter leads in your particular location. So let's begin today's session, software supply chain security. And the spotlight is on SBOM, software bill of material. So if you're a beginner and you haven't heard of these terms, I would suggest there is a very good session by Tracy Reagan. She came to DevOps Summit Canada 2022, where we talked about time to add SBOMs to your DevOps pipelines. I would highly recommend that you check out that session, because that session will also set the perspective around what we are talking today. I will actually drop the link in the description box if you're interested to check out her session. Now, let's begin this session today with software supply chain security, right? I mean, security is on top of everybody's mind, but when it comes to software development, and as software professionals, we have a greater responsibility in this aspect. So software supply chain is made of everything and everyone that touches your code in the software development lifecycle. It includes application development, continuous delivery pipelines, infrastructure deployment, and also operational aspects of your software. In practice, there are two major aspects when we talk about software supply chain security. The first part entails the best practices from risk management and cybersecurity. And the second part is also about evolving standards and tools. Software bill of material is one of the candidates in this area. We also can look at other aspects like enhanced vendor assessment, open source software controls, and vulnerability management. We will touch base upon a few more aspects in and around software bill of material in this session. Okay, so now we are at a stage when we can talk about SBOMs. SBOMs is a foundational capability for managing the complexity and securability of your modern software deployment. And as product leaders, we must meet the growing amount of technology, best practices, solutions to support the delivery of software bill of materials. As per Gartner analyst Mark Driver wrote in the research report titled Emerging Tech, a software bill of material is critical to software supply chain management. Also, Gartner believes that by 2025, 60% of the organizations procuring mission critical software solutions will mandate SBOM disclosures in their license and support agreements, up from less than 5% in 2022. So it is definitely a strategic area for future to look into. So I'll introduce a few more perspective around software bill of material and how it helps the software supplier, the producers, and their software. Of course, when people are using or consuming their software. So I'll highlight a few points. Reducing unplanned and unscheduled work. Obviously, when you know about the ingredients of your software, what kind of, components you have within the software composition, which kind of languages you have, what kind of vulnerabilities exist through those languages or those kind of third-party components. I think it also helps to reduce unplanned, unscheduled work. Reducing code bloat. And this is not a new word to people who have been working as software developers for a long time. Dozens of different versions of code exist because of so many dependencies and risks which are introduced through integrating, let's say, third-party components, or having upgrades on third-party components. And then you land up in creating dozens of different versions of code just to help improve your security posture. Adequately understand dependencies within the boundaries of complex projects, knowing and complying to license obligations. So if you're using like third-party tools or third-party software plugins, then obviously watch out for the license obligation, how to use this, how to kind of embed the code or a component into your software life cycle. Monitoring components for vulnerabilities. This is one of the most essential and important parts of creating that software bomb. It gives you visibility on, how many vulnerabilities exist, how many vulnerabilities would affect or impact you. It is like part of your executable binaries. And what is the impact of these vulnerabilities? It helps you in decision making around, what are the next steps. End of life, of course, it helps you to manage end of life software solutions. So of course, upgrade, patching, not only for your code which you have written, but also integrated to the dependencies you have introduced in the code, making code easier to review. Another interesting fact is blacklisting of banned component. You do not want to have banned components into your software lifecycle development, right? And providing an SBOM to a customer so that the customer can integrate it in their workflows and exchange SBOMs as and when needed. Now, we have also mentioned that vulnerability management being one of the main or key components of SBOM, usability and benefits. So we introduced this capability shortly. The primary use case for VEX, or vulnerability exploitability exchange, is to provide users, which is developers, operators, service providers, managed services providers, system integrators, additional information on whether a product is impacted by a specific vulnerability is included in the component or not. With the recent vulnerabilities which had a lot of attention from the software development organizations like Log4j, you would appreciate that this is one of the areas where SBOM can help to assert the status of the vulnerabilities in specific products and status of if you are affected, that is no remediation, not affected, that no remediation is required regarding this vulnerability, or affected, that action needs to be recommended or to remediate or to address this vulnerability. Fixed, like, okay, this vulnerability is already fixed, don't care about it too much. And under investigation, it is not known whether these product versions are affected by these vulnerabilities. An update will be provided in a later release. So what happens to software supply chain security? So when it comes to VEX, when you integrate VEX with software BOM, basically what you would be doing is you include this capability into your workflow, and software supplier determine that the vulnerability, if it doesn't affect the build software, that relevant code isn't included in the compiler, or relevant code is present but not used or exposed. That will help suppliers to also look at components which are not affected or no action is needed, and consumers can integrate SBOM data, vulnerability data, and VEX data to make more risk-based decisions. So with the rise in the AI based tools and some kind of software development capabilities around vulnerability management also can be introduced in that way. Now we talk about SBOM ecosystem. So who does care about SBOM, right? So I mean, just to simplify this, I put forward three parties: software producers who use software BOM to assist in the building and maintenance of their supplied software; the software procurers, which uses SBOM as to inform pre-purchase assurance, negotiate discounts, and plan implementation strategies; and software operators who use to inform vulnerability management and asset management, and also integrate this into like audit functions or vulnerability management functions and software asset management functions. When it comes to SBOM and the decision of a make or a buy decision, or which tool application is needed, how do we ensure that what components of SBOM is needed in our our ecosystem of software development? Obviously, it's not an easy answer to search for. There are guidance and guidelines available on how to look at several dimensions of decision making, and I'll introduce you to 6 of these key dimensions and decision points that emerge from NTIA, which has like a multi-stakeholder process for SBOM. It helps you articulate the needs between the requester and the supplier of SBOM. Now, these 6 components I will briefly introduce to you. Baselining component information. This is one of the primary aspects of SBOM. So does your SBOM includes all baseline components and information attributes, metadata, associated with those attributes, and so on and so forth. Format and machine readability. Like your SBOM is a baseline supporting machine readable format, which means that you can integrate it in your workflow. You can integrate it in your CI/CD pipelines. You can integrate it into your software asset management process, procurement process. You also can integrate that data into, let's say, audit management, and so on and so forth. What is the depth required for you to have those SBOMs readily available? So all primary components with all transitive dependency and known and unknowns are declared. So if, let's say, that this vulnerability would not affect your code because it exists but is not executed, those kind of things. Then generation frequency. So somehow also I would like to stress that every organization is not at the same stage. So maybe you're more looking towards, with every update or every change of code, major, minor, or releases or patch release, you want to kind of update your SBOM, and you should look for that capability when you are deciding for that tool or application to be built or to be bought. Delivery and interoperability. There are several standards for SBOM today. Obviously, these standards are also evolving with interoperability perspective. But for now, I think with every bundled with every product version, your SBOM, what kind of format it uses, how interoperable it is, and when you archive this for the supplier, or from a supply side, is it still retrievable, it's still readable, and so on and so forth. Adjacent enhancements and vulnerability claims. So as we also mentioned, the supplier makes attestation for potentially exploitable vulnerabilities, like introducing VEX into software BOM. Also, how they are actually targeting to, from a lead time perspective, address new vulnerabilities in the software development life cycle. These are few areas which you can look at. But for now, I think we also would like to move on and introduce some perspectives on the minimum element of SBOM. So this is all curated information. This is publicly available, and NTIA has done an excellent job in publishing all this material onto their website. So you can actually go and read, check out, do some research on these aspects which I'm sharing today. SBOM provides those who produce, purchase, and operate software with information that enhances your understanding about a supply chain. So the purpose of this is to track any potential risk or newly emerged vulnerabilities and risk. Foundational data layer on which further security tools, practices, and assurance can be built. Now, the minimum elements of this tool or this capability would be the data fields, the document baseline information about each component that should be tracked, and some attributes associated with that component itself, like version of the component, who's the supplier, verified and code sign the components if they are required. There are several of those things which you can also go and check out in those publications which I have mentioned. Automation support automation of software BOM to be automatically generated in a machine readable format, and also can be integrated into the workflow. Data formats used to generate and consume SBOM includes most popular ones: SPDX, CycloneDX, and SQUID tags. We talk more about it in the upcoming slides. But for now, I think we move on. I also will emphasize practices and processes, defining the operations of SBOM request, generation, and their use, and how you are ensuring these practices are being followed in a unified and standardized way. Now, talking about data formats, I think there are a lot of data formats which are coexisting. And there are also proprietary data formats which are included as part of the SBOM tools and applications. I will introduce Software Package Data Exchange, SPDX. SPDX is an open standard for communicating software bill of material information, including license, security, and other related information. SPDX specification is recognized as an international open standard for security, license compliance, and other software supply chain artifacts. And the ISO number, the IEC number, I have listed down in the slide. CycloneDX, it's an initiative of OWASP. It's a full stack bill of material, and it's this standard that provides advanced supply chain capabilities for cyber risk reduction. Obviously, the specification supports a lot of specific SBOM capabilities, starting from software bill of material, software as a service bill of material, hardware bill of material, operability bill of material, then vulnerability detection and vulnerability exploitability exchange, VDR and BX. Software identification or SWID. Software identification tags are defined by ISO IEC. And it's also standard in its own way. Development of SWID tags standard is part of the work program of ISO IEC, Joint Technical Committee, JTC, Subcommittee Working Group, and these are all references. If you want to check out more of these, you can go to these reference points which you see on the slide. It's primarily focused on IT asset management and software asset management standards. Now, when it comes to software bill of material tools and applications, obviously there are a number of tools which are like open source, there are commercial tools, there are tools which support a number of data formats, there are tools which are, having a specific capability which is focused on, let's say, vulnerability management or, those kind of things. But software bill of material is not intended to be a static document. What it means is that, you cannot generate it once and just forget about it. It's not a file. It's not a CSV. I mean, of course, if you're a beginner, you can start with that perspective, but over time, you'll have to evolve this in a more dynamic um, posture of software bill of materials. Evaluating an open source or commercial SBOM tools for SBOM generation and management is difficult. For the reasons that we have mentioned, number of formats, the standards are evolving. It's also a capability which can be introduced at different life cycle stages, as it impacts, and also it impacts the accuracy of SBOM, and also SBOM produced by its different tools are hardly comparable. So what should be some of the best practices you can think about? And this is also curated information from several blogs from the industry leaders, which are publicly available information. Automatically generating SBOMs as part of your software delivery pipeline. So look at, how easy and flexible the tool is when you are choosing that tool to integrate into your SDLC process. Automated SBOMs that are generated as part of CI/CD process can be cryptographically signed and verified. Lack of universal standards for SBOM formatting means that some SBOMs include more metadata. Providing SBOMs for SaaS applications can alert customers to situations which the SaaS platform can be compromised due to vulnerabilities. Now, when we talk about SBOM, we can talk more deeply into what happens with SBOM production and provisioning. So when you are a software supplier, the characteristic of the SBOM production process is as follows. Identification of software components included in the software deliverable. Acquiring data about the components used in software development. Importing component data into a structured SBOM format. And validating SBOMs to ensure the format is valid, the baseline attributes are present. So when we move on to the other aspect, that every organization has distinct needs and capabilities for software creation and distribution, right? So provisioning of SBOMs. SBOM supplier must decide on an SBOM format that will be generated during their build process. So we have talked about those formats in the past few slides. SBOM can be created by leveraging tools that can be integrated in the build system. So there are some open source tools, commercial tools, and we can talk about those tools during the later slides. System assurance requires visibility of external services that cross trust boundaries. So if you think about like cloud technologies or open source technologies, these are like cross trust boundaries where you will have to have visibility of your external services as well. Supplier may regard SBOM as competitive information as well. So you may not want the SBOM to be publicly distributed. And lastly, SBOM validation may be performed before delivering an SBOM to ensure that SBOM consumers will be able to parse your SBOM, right? So these are like some aspects of production of SBOM and provisioning of SBOMs. Now, when it comes to consumers, we talk about acquisition, management, and use. So software consumers are broadly defined to include commercial and non-commercial entities acquiring third-party software capabilities from a supplier. So obviously, SBOM acquisition, we have talked about this in the past few slides in different formats. The consumer needs to know that SBOM exists, where to find it, how to access it. Suppliers can support this through advertisements or enabling consumer discovery, right? And I have a slide later on to show the overall process. Now, SBOM in injection and parsing. data feeds into your workflow. So if, let's say, scenario one, the best practice is that the data from SBOM feeds into the enterprise workflow, including procurement, asset management, vulnerability management, overarching supply chain risk management. And scenario two is you are only using it for archival purposes. You are not someone who has the capacity or intention to go after a dynamic SBOM and integrating into your workflow, at least for now. So both scenarios should be supported. Now, when it comes to the management and use of SBOM, software entity resolution components can be accurately mapped to vulnerabilities, and it also has to be integrated in one way into configuration management and software asset management workflows. Third-party processes and platforms like CMDB, asset management, SOC compliance, monitoring, procurement, audits, etc., they are looking for that kind of information to be integrated into the workflow. Transformation of SBOM, when you are a consumer, you will also like to have an auditable custody of SBOM and also storage of SBOM in a machine-readable format. Lastly, intellectual property and confidentiality. The licensing status of SBOM should be explicit and preferably enumerated with the SBOM itself. From the software consumer perspective, the consumer would, without limitation, be allowed to use SBOM for internal purposes. And there are other aspects of acquisition, management, and use, which is there in this guideline from NTIA. There's a reference I have linked into the slide. Now, sharing and exchanging of SBOMs and the overall process. So from SBOM creation to use and further sharing and exchange, there are several aspects of this. Sharing SBOM data across the supply chain will involve a combination of technical platforms, predictable data formats, and operational processes. So you have to look at it from a holistic perspective. There is not a single one-size-fits-all solution across the diverse need of an entire enterprise ecosystem. While SBOMs can be shared now, the NTIA software component transparency framing work group continues to work to improve that. So what should be the license obligations? How should we exchange this data inside and outside our organization? SBOM, of course, it's an evolving space, and we all watch out for what is happening in the context of interoperability. And if, let's say, we see that there are multiple standards coexisting at the same time, would these tools be mandated to have different formats available for different consumers? So anyways, these are things which are point of discussion. There are various organizations who are shifting the needle, like said WASP, Linux Foundation. There's an organization, OpenSSF, which is also looking at like broader aspects of software security and supply chain security and all that. I think this is something which you should investigate as well from your end. But for now, I will only introduce a few tools and applications to set your pace. And obviously, there are a number of other tools available today with different formats. You can check out yourself. I'll introduce these four tools. FOSSA is a scalable and end-to-end management, third-party code, license management, and open source vulnerability scanner. FOSSA tool has been used to ship software by 7,000 open source projects, like Kubernetes Webpack, Terraform, and so on and so forth. Mend is another tool widely known as and once known as White Source. Mend offers number of software composition analysis tools, and if you don't know about this, I think this is a topic for another day, but you can check out some more information about software composition analysis and what connection it has with SBOM. It is used to track each component, including direct and transitive dependencies, identify vulnerabilities, provide remediation paths, and also update SBOM automatically as components change. JFrog X-Ray is another tool with the latest capability to support SPDX and CycloneDX standard formats. X-Ray security tools creates SBOM with a machine-readable inventory of software components and dependencies and let you export SBOM in both these formats. Anchor is another tool which supports CycloneDX, SPDX, and also their proprietary Swift own SBOM format, generating SBOM at each stage in the development process, from source code repositories, CI/CD pipelines to container registries and runtime components. So all this is possible through these tools. There are other open source tools which you can check out as well. With that, I would like to sign off for today. Hope you enjoyed this session. If you would like to have a more deeper insight into these topics or any other topic, you can join our face-to-face meetup. The next meetup is planned and also updated on our chapters. So please watch out for our face-to-face events. With that, it is the end of the session today. I would also like to highlight that if you're interested in reading, there's a lot of books from PACT, which we also carry for our face-to-face meetups. So if you join there, you can be one of our lucky winners to grab a copy. Thank you for joining us today.